Welcome to Do More Good. I'm Rose Bax, and I'm a professional benefit and fundraising auctioneer. With nearly 20 years of auction experience, I have seen a lot. My husband and I conduct 70 to 80 nonprofit events every single year, and we see the good, the bad, and the ugly. We've seen it all. We can help you do better. This is Do More Good. I'm so excited to have my guest with me today. Not only is she incredibly talented in the world of nonprofits and planning, but she's also an incredibly dear friend of mine. So she has 17 years of experience in nonprofits. She's currently the Director of Development at North Idaho CASA. She was one of the founding members and part of the Coeur d'Alene Backpack Program since its inception. She is a lead team and volunteer planner for Wine, Women, and Shoes. She's served with the PTO. She's also a board member of the Viking Booster Club. She's a wife. She's a mom of 2 teenage boys, which one of them I think is almost out of his teens. We've got a nearly 20-year-old coming up, I believe. And she also was recently recognized as the Adult Volunteer and the Brightest Star Award for Idaho Philanthropy Day. So if I had to recognize my guest, Kristin Ludwig, with just one word, it would be rock star. So, Kristin, thank you for coming and being with me this morning. I appreciate you so much.
Well, thanks for having me. I was thinking on my way here, 2 of my favorite things, conversations and Rose. So this is a combination of 2 of my favorite things. And thank you so much for the introduction. It's hard to believe that I've actually been doing this for 17 years, and it's 2023.
I know, the time does go by fast. It's amazing. You wake up every day and say, wow, it's another year gone. It's another week gone.
Yep. And when we moved to this community, I had a 15-month-old and was pregnant with Nolan.
Oh my gosh.
And so when we were just talking about how long I've been doing this, he is 16. So this has been my life. And when I moved to Coeur d'Alene, I was like, I am going to get involved first as a mom, and then it just happened. And here we are, 17 years later.
Yeah, well, our community is very fortunate that you opted to dive in.
Well, thank you.
With both feet and all hands on deck. And I'm actually really glad that you mentioned that about the boys and about being committed to just setting that example of, you came here with a baby and one on the way, and how critical it was for you to invest and be connected to your community. And so do you feel like that has translated? Do you feel like you've been able to convince your boys of the value of being invested in community?
Yeah, so Keegan, who is 19 and down at Grand Canyon University experiencing the desert, knowing that he does not want to stay there and does not want to live there, but he's like, I don't know how I'm going to be able to afford to come and live in Coeur d'Alene. And at the time when we were moving back in 2005, the research that I did was it was a senior living community. Like Coeur d'Alene had more seniors than younger people. So being a mom of young children, I was doing school research on the schools and what, play groups I could get involved in. And it's just so funny how the evolution of this community has literally happened right before my eyes.
Absolutely.
And having a commitment to get involved is, I think, where it starts, because I'm not a passive person.
Shocking.
I know. It's super controlling at the time. I have let a lot of that go, believe it or not. But I wanted to be involved, and it was the same as being a mother. I wanted to be the main caregiver for my kids. I didn't want to continue my career and put them in daycare. Like, that was something I consciously decided that I wanted to do. So being a room mom, being involved in Kinder Magic, my kids went to preschool there, and then right into elementary school PTO. And it's just like the PTO and the soccer moms, they get a bad rap. They're just like, they're nitpicky. They've got too much time on their hands. And that's so not the case.
Well, as a PTO and a soccer mom, 100% not true. Right?
Yeah.
It's not an abundance of time. It's the intention of using every minute you have, really.
Right.
It's not an abundance of it. You just use it so well.
It's not even a matter of keeping your kids so busy that they don't have time to be bored. Bored was the B word in our house. We were not allowed to say the word bored because I said, you know what? boring people get bored, and we are not boring people. So we kept busy, but at the same time had that downtime, to be with the kids. And it was also, I wanted my boys to recognize that just because I'm in the room as a room mom doesn't mean that I'm there to helicopter you or to monitor you, because I trust you in the friendships that you're making. And it was the same with being a soccer coach. I was my boys' soccer coach for 12 years. And it's like, really, do you want your mom as a coach? But it was something that we enjoyed, and it was another way that I could contribute to the community. And all of the kids that I've met, 2 seasons per year for 12 years, that's a lot of kids. And I still have kids today that'll reach out to me and say, thank you so much for coaching or teaching me that my pee should be clear. That was a very awkward conversation we always would have about staying hydrated. And
kids need to learn some of those things.
Especially on some of the older kids' teams. But anyway, I consciously made that effort to immerse myself in this community because I did not want to be somebody that would criticize without contributing. So I usually enter every conversation with thinking, how can I contribute more than I can criticize?
I love that.
Yeah.
I think we should
It's not mine. I feel like I took it from somebody. I think Brene Brown said it.
Well, it's okay to take things from Brene Brown. She'd be honored, I'm sure.
Yes. But it really made you think about it because it's so easy to point out the problems. And even with events and like we're going to get into and talk about with the nonprofits, it's like it's so easy to just throw some criticism out there. Yeah. And if you really aren't contributing, you need to ask yourself why.
Absolutely. I think if we all just use that as our guidepost, are we going to criticize this? And if we're not willing to do something about it, then we likely can just keep some of that bottled up inside.
Or like I like to say, if you can't contribute, then just shut up.
Yeah. If you can't contribute, then just shut up. I'm going to have that printed somewhere. Oh, my gosh. So one thing I have to mention. You said you did 2 seasons of soccer every year, so spring and fall soccer. Okay, so for those of you that don't know, spring soccer is treacherous. It sounds wonderful because it says spring.
It's not wonderful.
It's terrible. So
especially off of Lancaster.
Oh, absolutely. It is absolutely terrible.
It is always 10 degrees colder.
Always. The wind always blows sideways. Yep. And in the spring, it's always raining
too. Sunny day or a snow day. Yeah.
Yeah. It's terrible out there. So thank you for that. That's incredible. So from PTO to the backpack program, soccer, and then to CASA. So you've been at CASA for a few years now. It was a very natural transition, obviously, for you to end up in that role. But CASA, it does incredible work. No one can speak to it better than you. So tell us about what it is that drew you to CASA and some of the incredible work that CASA does every single day behind the scenes. Most people have no idea the work that CASA is doing. So
in 2017, I was actually walking with my girlfriend Stacy, who was an advocate there. So court-appointed special advocates are CASAs. Other people might hear of them as GALs. So they are, depending on the state, they are called either guardian ad litems or CASAs. And we like to say that our CASAs are ordinary people that do extraordinary things because you don't have to have any special skill set to be an advocate. You go through a 6-week training. You have supervisors that help you walk through the process of the court system. So these are children that have been rescued from their homes because of abuse and neglect from law enforcement, and then they are put into the foster care system. A lot of our kiddos are with kin. A lot of grandparents are taking on that burden of raising their children, whether mom and dad are involved in drugs or have a situational trauma that has kind of set them back. So our volunteers are awesome because they want to be there. And I think that is why I have always been drawn to volunteer organizations, because it's not like a job that you begrudgingly go to and you're just like, oh God, rah, rah, rah. It's like, I want to be here. I believe in the mission. I believe in the cause. I'm passionate about it. And when you have a group of people that they are there because they want to be there, your possibilities are endless.
Absolutely.
You're like a team to be reckoned with. So that is what our CASAs are. They fight for those kids in court. like bulldogs. And that's what we need to do, because mom and dad get a lawyer.
Yep.
Health and welfare want the family reunited, and so do we so badly. But sometimes the parents just, they can't get their shit together. And you just have to say enough is enough. So there were some laws recently that were voted in by the legislature that keep kids not in foster care forever. And CASA is 30 years this year, 2023. Sandra Davis, back in 1993, applied for the EIN and founded our first judicial district CASA program.
Wow.
So 30 years of advocacy is huge.
Yeah.
Is huge. And I was able to talk to some of the advocates that, believe it or not, have been doing it for almost that entire time. And the reasons why and the stories they have. And it's hard. It's hard to see kids go back to failed reunifications and mom and dad just again and again and again. But then some of those stories are super successful. And these kids come out of trauma and chaos stronger and better. Those are the stories we like to focus on. But,
Absolutely.
And not a lot of people know about CASA because child victims is not a pleasant topic.
Absolutely.
And when we were fortunate enough to move into our building in 2019 on 4th Street, we had a pull sign. And with marketing, everything's like, okay, we have access to this awesome sign. And I just wanted to put child victims so big. And there were so many people, even on our board, that were like, well, we can't do that. Well, why? They are victims. And honestly, the earlier they recognize that they are victims, that people that you love and care about you should not treat you like that, then the healing can begin. And we have found that now through our research. So I think people are being a little bit more open-minded to not being ashamed.
Sure.
And saying, I am a victim or I am a survivor.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is what I'm going to do to heal this trauma, because our biggest thing now is that we want these kiddos to realize that this does not have to happen again. And they can stop this cycle because it's the same families, it's the same generations, it's generational abuse and neglect that really has to stop at some point.
You're shedding light, basically.
Yes.
If we can bring this to light, then we can do a lot more good than if it's tucked away in the darkness.
And it's hard. It's hard for kiddos, but more importantly for parents to recognize that just because they were raised this way does not mean that this is what they have to provide for their children.
Absolutely.
That they are worthy. They are worthy of more.
And so with that in mind, do you have like tools and classes, and what does this kind of reunification process look like for families?
So for us in the child protective system, our supervisors supervise the advocates to just walk those kiddos through that court process. Some cases are 6 months to a year. Other cases go on a little bit longer. But really under our purview, and under the First Judicial District CASA, that is all our program is required to do. We get funding from the state. We get VOCA funding, right victim services. But because we are who we are, we see all of these outlining needs. Yeah. COVID was a big eye-opener because the kiddos weren't in school. So counselors didn't have eyes on them. A lot of kids fell under the radar. And we realized that tutoring was something that these kids needed. Project Permanency was a program that came out of Charity Reimagined, how they did the Coeur d'Alene Press program that kind of turned in. And then we internalized that and took that upon ourselves to write a grant for that. So those are programs that we are providing to our foster kiddos and our families outside of really what we should be doing. But we are focused solely on those advocates representing those kiddos in court. And we have been fortunate because this community is so giving and because we have rock stars that are deciding, like, these are the programs that we need to do, that we're able to support the community in that. So, and that's exciting stuff.
It's really exciting. I mean, I have a small window of vision into that. And it's always very exciting for me to see how many people it takes. Obviously your team is actually, your in-house team is quite small to do the incredible work that you're doing, and how many child victims that you're able to interact with and provide services to is really pretty monumental based on the size of your team. But that's because you have good people around you.
And I think that the national platform for a volunteer organization, it's really set up for success.
Yeah.
But you have to have the right people in the right places in order to be successful that way.
So you mentioned that an advocate they're just ordinary people that do extraordinary things, which I love that. So who is an ideal advocate? Who's the right person that's listening to this today saying, I wonder if I could be a CASA. So speak to that a little bit. Who's the right one?
So we have found that traditionally people that are retired because they have the time, and maybe in law enforcement or education, because those are people that have children in mind. Also, maybe medical professionals, anybody really that interact with kids at some point, because those are the relationships that they kind of want to pick up and nurture. And maybe they can use their own examples as far as like their own children or their own grandchildren, that they really then want to be that support person. And again, in our research, we have found that kids that have suffered from trauma only need one significant adult in their life, somebody that's there to support their dreams, to give them confidence, and really to tell them, listen, you are worth what you want out of your life. It is okay to dream big because I am here to help support you. Now, unfortunately, with our caseload, a lot of our kiddos are under the age of 5. And the babies are the babies, so their needs, literally just their needs of shelter, safety, sleep and nourishment are what those advocates are there to make sure that happens.
Under 5.
It's our little ones and the teenagers that are getting lost in all of this, and they are the ones that need a CASA even more than the babies. And a lot of our CASAs come with the intention of having a relationship with those kiddos, because that's what they're looking for and that's what they want. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's very rewarding to be able to see those relationships flourish, and especially have kiddos that come back after years and say, my CASA is who saved me.
I can't even imagine the burden and also the joy that comes from acknowledging that you may be the only adult that makes a positive influence in a kid's life, and what good comes out of that. I think that we have this misconception that we have to do big, extravagant things in order to make a difference, but that's just not the case. They don't have to be. They have to be normal things. We just need to do normal things oftentimes to make a difference.
And it's that smallest little thing, whenever you hear about the thing like, oh, pay it forward and all of that stuff, like it could just be a comment of, how was school today? Or maybe they got an A on their spelling test, and just enough really to just boost that confidence and that worthiness of that child. Because so many kiddos, especially in the elementary school, they base their self-worth on how they do in the classroom.
Absolutely.
And I feel like teachers now are a lot more privy to that. So there's no more you go out in the hallway or you go, here to segregate the ones that are having, more problems, where you make it a group effort or push them with a buddy and have them study and stuff together. So that's where our learning lab came in, because we realized that kids of school age really do get their confidence with how successful their grades are. And so we want to be able to provide them any help. And that is something that we just have noticed a huge difference in that self-confidence. And once those kiddos are like, I can do this, then they can do so much more. They can make friends. They can even stand up to their abusers, and say, hey, hold on, this is, or have enough confidence to go to a counselor and tell them, this is what's going on at home.
Absolutely.
Because we have to, it has to start somewhere.
And so for a person that maybe says, okay, I don't have the criteria, or I don't feel confident enough to be a CASA, how can the community at large support CASA in their efforts to, make an impact in these kids' lives, whether it's exposing the circumstances or just letting kids know that there's resources for them, or are there resources that we can provide as a community to CASA? How can
and that's what is so hard, because there are so many people that are like, oh, I could never do that. and then we come back with the classic line, well, if it's not you, then who?
Yes.
But I understand that. So we have several volunteers in the office. One lady, Deb Fisher, has worked with us for 15 years.
Wow.
And she
Thanks, Deb.
is,
That's amazing.
yes, the sweetest woman. Her and her husband also do like tech services for the underprivileged, which is just great. They're great community people. And she said, I enjoy working in the office because I could not do what the volunteers do. So she knew that enough about herself and to protect her own heart, but to still contribute to the organization, which is fantastic. And I always say, if you can't volunteer, then donate, because everyone's got some cash they can throw our way. And from that, we have both, restricted and unrestricted grants and donors. And a lot of people are like, use the money how you feel fit. But a lot of them have that quantitative need to help the kids. So those programs like the Learning Lab and Project Permanency that help families that reunify just with the smallest things, like a working washer and dryer. Like to you and I, we can call the repairman or have somebody come out and do it, and it's an inconvenience. But for somebody that is really trying to hold it together with their addiction and to follow a parenting plan, and if the car doesn't work or the washing machine doesn't work, it throws a literal wrench into their life. And so we have found that just providing some releasing that financial burden with some of those everyday things, it really does help the parents refocus on their kiddos and getting them to school on time, because truancy was like a huge thing too. So
Absolutely. Well, I love that. Seems like a really great segue into, obviously we're talking about funding, and Project Permanency was new last year. Am I correct? So new last year. And I loved that at your event, we were able to share some really great success stories about how Project Permanency had really, to your point about a working washer and dryer, or getting new tires for the inclement weather that was preventing from getting to work and from getting to school, how those little things make such a huge difference in the lives of people that are struggling. And so we were able to share a lot of that at your event, which if you know Kristin at all, you know that she is powerhouse when it comes to events. And I'm amazed by so many of the things that you do. But one of the things that stands out the most to me is that you have this incredible ability to activate people. You have this.
Not because I'm loud.
No,
because I'm loud.
Not just because you're loud, but it's almost it's a bad analogy, so we might have to edit this out. But it's almost like a cattle prod. Like, you have this ability to actually make people do things, to move forward, to whether it's gathering up a bunch of people to volunteer, or it's encouraging people to show up in a very financially successful manner out at the Hagedon Event Center, and in their most, last year it was a spooky soiree, and it was so much fun, and everybody came just with intention, not just for the show, not just for the party, but they came because you had encouraged them before they ever got in the door. There was motivation. They knew their purpose. They knew that showing up there meant that they were going to engage and that they were going to participate, and in doing that, they were going to fund these projects like Project Permanency. But more so, they just trust you. They believe in what you're doing, and I would love, I want to know what it is that makes Kristin Ludwig, what it is that makes you tick. How do you engage these people to follow? And I know obviously it's the mission. I mean, CASA is so compelling in its own right, but we know that there's a difference. Sometimes really compelling organizations don't get the support that they need, or maybe even that they deserve, but that you've been able to activate people. So how do you do it? How do you do it?
It's a good question. I always go in with the intention of education, like just educating people on something that they might not know. Because there's so many of us that sit in that dark place and are like, okay, I don't know what's going on, or I would rather not know what's going on. So I feel like when you bring it to light and you do it in a fun way, and trust me, it has been hard, because there is nothing funny about abuse and neglect. Our supervisors and our advocates have to look and fight for horrific situations. And I'm always the one that's like the lighthearted one. I deal with empathy different than most people. I always add humor when sometimes it might not even be appropriate. But that's just how I function. I'm super optimistic, and I always think the glass can be refilled, right? Mm-hmm. So with that intention, I always try to invite instead of ask. So most people are like, oh, Kristin's going to ask for money. Well, a couple years ago, I stopped doing that. I just invite. I invite someone to be a sponsor. I invite somebody to buy a table. And I guess that is essentially asking for money. But with that invitation, there becomes a lot less pressure. Mm-hmm. And I feel like people enter into it with, I want to help, and sure, I'll get a table, and mm-hmm. yes, I'll be there, and I'll bring somebody that might not know about CASA. Because with that education can come a little fun. Mm-hmm. So I always say that I'm the one that gets to do the fun stuff, mm-hmm. and the supervisors, have to do the hard stuff. And always trying to find that unique piece, because I've gone to a ton of events as a guest, mm-hmm. and I feel like a number. Mm-hmm. And so at my events, I really try to have people feel like they are a guest. Mm-hmm. And it is getting harder and harder. Mm-hmm. But just remembering, because I'm getting old, so I have to write stuff down now. And just remembering, like, when somebody would call and say, oh, I'm out at Hayden Lake and we're going to be in town for your event. We've never gone before. And then I give them the link, and then I track them down at the event because I have a note, find Ann and Sal Smith. And then they're even sitting at their table. And mm-hmm. the event has been 2 hours in. And I go and I was like, Ann, hi, I'm Kristin. We talked on the phone. She goes, oh, my God. So it's just those little mm-hmm. touches. And I love having my event sold out. Mm-hmm. So like 2 weeks prior to that, mm-hmm. the night, having that happen, it allows you to then focus on the details. Mm-hmm. And so many people are so last minute around here, and I never say no. Like I'm always like, yes, you can come. I'll find you a seat. But with that...
Hey, but still buy your tickets early.
Yes. But with that, compromises the event and the integrity of the people that were my first people to buy a VIP table.
Yep.
So yeah, you're going to get that best seat in the house, and I'm going to make you feel special because I am happy that you're there.
Absolutely.
Because we all have, I don't like to say 1 million because that's a lot, but literally probably 20 other places that they could be.
Absolutely.
At that day and time. One being in their pajamas at home.
And that's very compelling.
And people do that earlier and earlier.
All the time. Yeah, we've actually noticed, we'll talk about this in just a minute, but timelines have shrunk.
And you have helped me with that because I am now like the Nazi when it comes to timelines.
Yeah.
But those are the things that are behind the scenes that people that attend events and like, oh my gosh, there was like great breaks, but it wasn't too much. And yep. I felt like it flowed really nice. People, that does not happen naturally. Right. That happens with a lot of ruler breaking.
Absolutely.
Behind the scenes.
I feel like it's one of the most common questions I hear is, how do you make the night of the event so successful? Well, it's really easy, and you plan that 6 months in advance. You plan every single detail, and you're down to the minute. And it's not actually easy, but I think there's this misconception that you just create this wonderful evening flow, and you've done it in the last 48 hours.
Yeah.
And the reality is there's months and months of
well, how many times have we changed like a live, flipped it?
Absolutely.
Or I've changed the timeline from 8:05 to 8:03.
Absolutely.
It's like, okay, no, at 8:03. And then you have to do it with a smile on your face. And there's nothing more horrific than getting a guest speaker that talks 8 minutes over timeline.
Absolutely.
In 8 minutes is huge.
8 minutes is far too long. By 3 times. By 3 times. Yeah.
And then you approach people and you're like, okay, well, really only 3 minutes. And they're like, 3 minutes? Like, that doesn't sound like a lot. It's
right.
like, put that on paper and in 22 font because
exactly.
so you can read it. And it's like, it goes by pretty quick.
It does go by really quick.
Yeah.
It does. And, but it's funny, never have you ever, correct me if I'm wrong, but have you ever sat at an event as a guest and said, gosh, I really wish there were more speakers tonight?
No.
Like, wouldn't it be awesome if they could just get one more person on the stage to talk tonight?
Nobody says that. Actually, we just had an appreciation event for our advocates. It's Advocate Plus One.
Yeah.
So they can bring a date or somebody that was significant, because the advocates really have to rely on each other, because a lot of this stuff is confidential.
Sure.
And they can't just go to coffee and be throwing names around and,
Absolutely.
talking about it out loud. So we had this Advocate Plus One event. This was our third year that we had it. We always have it in January because nothing's happening in January.
Yep.
And the supervisors, we got together and we were going to do some service awards. So we've now worked our way down to the 5-year service mark. And then I said, okay, well, what else should we include in the program? And my supervisor, Anissa, who's like, my work wife, she looks at me and she goes, nobody wants to hear anybody speak. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, oh my gosh, can we have a program that is not filled to the brim? But again, these are our people.
Yep.
We are appreciating them.
Yep.
They don't need to be lectured to or told stories about. And I did actually open up the mic, and there were a couple of advocates that came up because they wanted to share a story.
Sure.
Which was fantastic. But I think it takes those of us that are so tunnel vision in getting their attention. I've now kind of backed it up, and believe it or not, we're going to have our Luncheon Ray of Hope in March, on March 9th. And we're allowing 20 minutes or 15 minutes in the program for people to actually eat lunch and maybe talk with the people at their table.
Oh, what a novel concept.
I know. Are we starting a trend?
Oh my gosh, I love that. Well, I think that one of the things that stands out to me is so we rarely go to events. Between myself and Matt,
Right.
we conduct.
Or when you invite me to one, I'll go.
Right, absolutely. We conduct about 70 events a year, so it's pretty rare for us to be in a room where we are not working.
Right.
And so it's kind of fun to go on occasion when you're not working, because I think it reminds you of why people do come. Sometimes I can get a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a little discouraged, I guess the glimmer goes out sometimes for me when I start thinking about events, because all I think about is the timeline and
Yep.
taking off 2 or 3 minutes here and knowing that we have this speaker that is going to say really valuable things, but they are definitely going to go over time. So we have to build in on the back end. And
then people aren't going to be listening because they're going to be chatting. And then the drinking. I mean, the drinking's a whole other.
Absolutely. And so with that in mind, as a guest, I would love to hear 1 or 2 things about other events that you've been to. You don't have to name them.
Okay, good.
Don't call anybody out. But something that you've seen at another event that's not yours that you absolutely love, and something you've seen at another event that you have just thought, oh my gosh, I would never do that.
That I absolutely love.
So actually, before we talk about that, I would love to talk about your event, because it is so fun. It sells out every year, and it's just been, it kind of has its own
Well, wait
feeling.
a second. Can I correct you? We don't sell out every year. CASA Uncorked, we have not sold out yet.
Really?
Yes.
This is the year, you guys. This is
it.
the year. It's going to sell out.
So last year when you said the spooky soiree,
Yeah.
so I work with Chuck at the resort,
Yep.
and all of us locals know the resort is getting harder and harder to
Yep.
book dates.
Yep.
And we do it every October. It's either the 2nd or the 3rd, Thursday. And October is a long month. So anyway, long story short, my only option was the 27th last year. And it was right before the Halloween weekend, parties. And I personally do not like Halloween. It is not one of my favorite holidays. So I'm like, oh, do I do it? Do we embrace it? God, we don't want to make it a costume party, but how do I do it in a way to take advantage of the season? With the lanterns, with the theme, because I'm a sucker for a theme. Because once you choose a theme, it's super easy. Stuff falls into place. So to do a spooky soiree but not have it be a costume party, so I feel like we got that out there. And then with our Uncork the Live, that is traditionally wine corks because it's a wine-themed event, which we can talk about that later, how people will still criticize that. That's when we decided to do Unmask the Live instead of Uncork the Live. And that was a fun little twist that I'm glad that I was just like, you know what, let's just go for it. This is not going to be an every year theme. This was just because it was right before Halloween. So let's just take advantage of it one year and then we'll move on.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit. So Unmask the Live. You talked about themes. So how critical is it, do you think, to kind of the overall feel of your event for there to be continuity in theme? You do a really great job of that. So, and obviously you feel like it's important. Yeah.
Subtly, because sometimes people are over the top, with a theme. And I'm a minimalist at heart, and especially working with a nonprofit, it's like, it's money. It's money somewhere. Whether you had sponsorship money, it was still money that you spent that could have gone, someplace else. So I really am mindful of like the printed programs. First of all, I don't think anybody realizes how long you have to have stuff planned to go to press to have a printed program that is correct and up to date. I have people like 2 nights before the event saying, oh, hey, I'll donate this. And again, back to I can't say no. So it's like, that kind of stuff I have really let go of and use the PowerPoint, don't have paper, be a paperless event, because I don't want anybody to sit there and think, well, how much did this cost? Now, you and I are privy to that. Normal people might not be like, oh, how much does this cost? But I am very mindful of the expenses at my events. So sometimes people will come and be like, this is kind of like a minimalist thing, but I think that you can get it across very classy and very minimalist and still have people get it and have a good time.
Absolutely. So when you're going paperless, let's talk about your live auction and how critical it is for people to know what they're bidding on in advance so that they can...
And that's where I depend on you.
But you also do, there's a presentation of some sort.
Yes.
Are you putting up signage for people to look through? Is there a rotating PowerPoint?
The PowerPoint on rotation during the happy hour, and again, setting the mood. I'm now a big fan of an open bar for the first hour because I realize that sets the tone. You're not handing tickets to somebody that's then taking the ticket and being like, oh, here's my one free drink. There is something about the happy hour literally being the happiest hour because it encourages people to arrive early. You can have, a couple of drinks in that hour because there is one bar and there is a line and we, all have to act respectfully with that. But it really does set the tone for the event. And and I'm big on like energy. So if the energy is set and there's like some music playing in the background and people are having good conversations and everybody has a drink in their hand and it's a good time before we get down to the nitty-gritty, because you and I always like to kick off the night like with a bang. So even auctioning off the champagne or getting everything going with a toast, it really does set the mood for the giving and just to set everyone's intent with how many times am I going to raise my paddle tonight?
Yep.
And what am I going to contribute? I'm not going to criticize. But can we talk about the criticizing with the alcohol real quick?
Oh, yeah, let's.
So again, abuse and neglect. A lot of our kiddos come from, drug or alcohol addiction is a huge problem. And we do not minimize that at all. But everybody knows that when you have an adult event and you can offer some alcohol to help people get in the mood and have a good time and relax, but again, be mindful.
We're adults. We can be responsible.
I cannot tell you how many sidebar comments, emails, texts I get with, why do you have to have alcohol at your events? And it's so hard to respond back because the luncheon that will be, at lunch at noon, we will not have an open bar.
Sure.
We will not even have a bar available because it is a community outreach lunch in which we are talking about our programs and our need for volunteers. I feel like there is a time and place for adults to be adults.
I agree.
And to have it. And sure, some of the people that might have gone to the bar 2 or 3 times will raise their paddle a little bit more.
Yeah. It's interesting. There is also a line where there's too much and then we lose them. Right. So
gosh.
There is this fine.
Do we dare say wine, women, and shoes?
And so we find that a bar definitely And I have a luncheon coming up this spring. There will be alcohol. There will be full bar at the luncheon. And
which one's that? No, I'm kidding.
And it's funny because it actually, they have a specialty mimosa. That's going to be part of their, their specialty drink is a mimosa.
Specialty drink's always a good thing.
And it's cute. And, the whole event is about 90 minutes long.
Nice.
And so likely someone will have a mimosa or maybe a beer with their lunch, but they would do that anyway. Mm-hmm. So, but that is a very regular, I guess, depending on the nature of your event.
Sure.
The criticism of that can be real. Mm-hmm. But we know, and maybe you would disagree with me, but if we don't serve some sort of alcohol at our events, we have a much shortened timeline. And we already have a short timeline.
Yep.
As we have transitioned back into live events from our season of virtual events, we taught people in that season of virtual events that we could do a whole lot of business in 1 hour.
Yeah.
Remember, join us for 1 hour. We're going to go live from 7 to 8 p.m. or 8 to 9 p.m. or whatever that looked like for each individual organization. And so, we're doing these live broadcasts. And now that people are back in the room again, they have this certain expectation that we're going to maintain a really concise timeline. Yep. And unless your event is just exceptionally fun and you have a group of people that planned a party, which is so minimal. Most of them want to go nightcap. I mean, we're losing people 9:15, 9:30. Oh, people are out of the room. They want to go They want to go hit a lounge and, maybe go to Whispers or something like that.
Right, because do any of the events now, like some of them would have a band and people would stay. But now it's just kind of like, okay, we're going to blow this pop stand and go, or go home.
Absolutely. So having access to alcohol, unless your organization takes a strong stance against it, which some do. I mean, if you are specifically an alcohol or addiction recovery program, probably not appropriate for you to have alcohol.
No.
A lot of faith-based organizations choose not to have alcohol, but they may also totally permit someone to go. Like if you're at the Coeur d'Alene Inn, for instance, this is very common. We do events at the inn or even at the resort. Oh, yeah. They might go to Mulligan's at the inn, grab a glass of wine or a cocktail or even a bottle and bring that back into our venue, our event venue. But the organization takes the stance that says, we're not providing it.
Right.
But it's not discouraged necessarily. So they kind of, thread the needle there a little bit with that. But
having the host bar for the hour encourages that. And then again, it will just switch to cash bar. And there will people that will continue to drink, throughout the evening.
Sure. And so when you're doing your open bar, are you usually getting that sponsored, or is that just something that you kind of figure into the cost of what your ticket is? Or?
Both. I always try to get a sponsor, right? I invite the sponsorships to just come forward, but and we've been lucky to get that sponsored, and sometimes it's behind the scenes because again, the company or the person that's sponsoring it might be like, hey, have a drink on us. Or it might not be very, politically correct to be like, oh, yeah, bar hosted by blah, blah, blah. So we just, again, have to kind of play that to the donor's discretion.
Absolutely.
Which is fine.
And so with the themed event, it's very much about wine. Your event is very wine oriented. And I think some people, obviously, they really appreciate that. And so when you are out, we're going to talk a little bit about silent auction items. And so when you're procuring your silent auction items and your raffle items and your wine tree and all of those things, do you find that because your event is a wine themed event, that wine people are more inclined to participate? What do you feel like because of your theme, does it help you create a sense of excitement to participate?
It gets it does get tedious though, year after year after year. So we have kind of gotten away, even though it is uncorked, or CASA uncorked, there is that visual of the uncorked of the wine. And we, have the wine tree, and we've kept some of those things consistent. But back when I started in 2017, it was very much the silent auctions that were actual mini wine trees. And that's a lot to keep up with year after year after year. And then we found that our participants are like, well, it's nice to have, some alcohol thrown in there, which we're not allowed to have that. But it's like, okay, we can add different things. And then there are people that are like, well, it would be nice to have some silent auction items that don't have any, wine or alcohol at all. More experiences that we try to provide in my live. I'm now really into the experience, because people can buy stuff. Anybody can go and buy stuff. But if you're providing an experience that not normally they can purchase, or like a behind the scenes tour, or being at a restaurant during closed hours, or something like that's really unique and different that you just can't call somebody up and buy.
Yeah.
Those are the experiences that I want to offer up to our donors. So that's given a little bit of a turn of events, and it helps keep the event fresh. I always try to change something once a year, but not remove completely elements that might bring people there year after year after year.
Sure.
Like they might love the wine tree, and that's what they want to win because they want to, fill their cellar or give bottles out for gifts. And
Absolutely.
I feel like people need to change their mindset too. It's not always just them getting things for themselves, but really go into an event thinking, who's got a big birthday this year, or what big anniversary celebration do we have that maybe I can go together even with my table mates and get this live experience that we can then all share later in the year. And I feel like that is a huge intention that we're trying to set with any event.
Absolutely.
And because I also have the golf tournament, the fun run in June, and then we have these community outreach luncheons.
Yeah.
We're like, well, everybody likes to have lunch, and then we've got the golfers and the runners and then the wine drinkers. So I feel like we provide a unique opportunity with the events that we have throughout the year.
Absolutely. So let's go back to the silent auction a little bit. And do you feel like there is a right number? What feels like too many or not enough auction items?
I'm going to tell you a dirty little secret. Silent auction is so hard. It's so hard. And because we have a small staff, and unless I have a chair or find somebody that's like, I'm going to do the silent auction for you, I spend the least amount of time, if I have to do it, on silent auction. Jumping over to my other volunteer position at the Booster Club.
Yeah.
My neighbor, Ann Wilkie, she is a rock star.
Yes, she is.
And she, again, Booster Club offers a different opportunity because it allows all of the groups and sports to participate and make money for their group.
Yeah.
So you don't say no to silent auction. And she has she has hundreds of silent auction items. But every one of them is for an activity or, a special group, which is great. But actually procuring and doing a select few, and I'm all about quality versus quantity. So at Uncorked, because that is a lower line item as far as the money in, I try not to spend too much time, but again, procuring outside of just wine is always easier.
Yeah. So I understand that, what you're saying 100% about the silent auction being the ROI is low. Oftentimes, right? That's where your return on investment of time.
And as the director, we only have so much time in the day. So really putting together those live experiences for people.
Yeah.
And then the fun stuff during that happy hour, I think does matter. Like the participation, I always pay attention to price point.
Yep.
Is there a $25 price point? you and I talk about this at nauseam.
No, but I love it. Keep talking about that because I think a lot of people miss that.
The $25 price point, the $50 price point, and then traditionally with the $100 price point, we've all been at auctions that there's these 10 live awesome packages that are going to go for thousands of dollars. But there's this one that is so special that if you bought a $100 ticket and had 1 in 50 chance to win. So that's kind of where our Uncork the Live had come from. Again, not an original idea, but just a uniqueness to make it about Uncorked. And we would sell 50 corks at $100 a pop, which that, just came off the tongue super easy. And then with a unique winery on each of those corks. And then that way, that gives a person the opportunity to win one of these fabulous packages.
Absolutely.
And anybody can do that with the booster auction. We do the golden ticket, so that way there's only 50 and people are like, oh, what is that? And then you have to educate them on like, this is your chance. If you want one of these live experiences, you might win it for $100.
And the beautiful thing about that is you might have an experience that is, if you sell 50 tickets and they're $100 a piece, you've just generated $5,000 for your organization.
Yeah, and very rarely do we have packages that are valued at even half of that.
Absolutely.
Like I try to keep it around the $2,000 mark, and then that way, if they go for overvalue, great. But yeah, it's a win-win for organizations.
On Saturday, we just did one, and there was 100 of them at $100 a piece, so they generated $10,000. And
if I can sell out, we're going to do that.
I love it.
You want that exclusivity, and you can't expect half the people in the room to buy one.
Absolutely.
So you just have to weigh those. Yeah,
the numbers thing. We didn't get a chance to talk about that. We could talk about this stuff all day
numbers.
long. But the Best of Live really is a great way to save you some time in that timeline as well, because what we find is that sometimes we really want to keep it for what we find is about 3 minutes per item. So when we're scheduling our timeline, we really want that timeline to be less than 40 to 45 minutes at the most of live auction and paddle raise. And so we try to keep that live auction to 10 items or fewer. And so every once in a while you get 11 or 12 that are just too good to say no to.
I won't tell you how much we have for
well, and knowing your audience. So it's important to know that what we can do at CASA at that event is different than what we can manage at the Booster Club.
Yes, and that's CASA's 10 max.
Yeah, but at the Booster Club you probably could get 15, 16
because they're all going to the different organizations.
Exactly.
And people give based on like I'm going to give to baseball or I'm going to give to girls soccer. So that's fun in that regard. But yeah, our CASA people. And again, back to our patrons at CASA, they are so special because they do not have a personal investment.
Yep.
Their parents that are CASA kids' parents are in rehab and trying to keep themselves out of jail. They're not attending social events. Some of our donors have a history with foster families, being a foster child maybe themselves, or being in a situation that they, took on some kin and raised them at a certain point. So there is that emotional, tie. But sometimes people that never had experience with foster care, never even maybe volunteered in that capacity to be with kids, or even are exposed to kids that are from generational trauma or generational poverty, it's eye-opening to them. And that's where their heart is. Like, absolutely. I'm going to give to something that I thankfully have never had to experience in my life.
Yes.
And
what a gift to be able to walk in that.
I know. Those are the donors that I'm like, we did something. We did something to make them be here because, again, they could be at 20 different places.
Absolutely.
And they chose to be in this room with us. And I want to be very respectful of someone's time and provide them a really well-rounded evening. And there's nothing else better than just having people come up to you at the end of the event. And some of them are crying. Some of them are drunk. Some of them are like, oh my God, this was amazing. And like, they're like, I'll see you next year.
Yes.
Like that to an event director is like, I did what I was supposed to do.
Absolutely. I know my best compliment always is when people come up to me and they say, oh my gosh, how long have you been on staff at CASA? And I'll say,
I know.
I'll say, I'm not. So for me, it's the same thing. When you can articulate a message that really touches people in their core, and you do it with such compassion that they can't believe that you'd ever do anything else. It's such an honor to be able to walk in that place and to be able to acknowledge that this community is full of amazing people that want to do good.
Yes.
That want to do good.
Yes.
And I think sometimes people are a little heavy and they're burdened by what's happening in our community and in every community. I think not even just now, but always. I think you can find yourself burdened by what's happening around you. And you spend a few days just interacting with some incredible nonprofits in our community and seeing how people just come together. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people at a time come together to support one singular cause is pretty powerful.
They do. But again, it's back to the intention. And I had a little quote that I wanted to read, and I think it's appropriate right now. It's first, it is an intention, then a behavior, then a habit, then a practice. then it becomes second nature. It is simply who you are.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
And I feel like every time you walk into a room, you become that organization. Like you really take the time to understand and accept, and you've learned how to say no to other organizations to really make it matter. And whenever you have that exclusivity of like, you know what, I don't say yes to everybody. And this means something, and the people in the room are going to do something amazing together.
Yeah.
That is a feeling that I don't think a lot of people get.
Yeah.
And it gives me goosebumps because every time somebody walks in that door, I say to myself, they are going to be part of something fantastic today, and it's going to change their life.
Absolutely.
If they let it.
And generational, specifically with CASA, we have opportunity for generational changes.
Yeah.
Making generational impact in these.
And we always say, hey, we don't want to even be here.
Absolutely.
We
Wouldn't it be great if we
don't
didn't
want
exist?
abuse and neglect to even exist. Put us out of business.
Absolutely. Well, I do want to, we talk so much about what makes your event special. And so with that in mind, you talk about from the time the person walks in the door, you want them to feel like this event was created just for them, that the guest experience is totally taken into consideration. And so could you just share maybe there's probably people out there that are going to be listening to this that have never done an event, don't have any idea about what that looks like or maybe they're getting ready to do their first event, or maybe they're feeling like I need to just revamp. I've been doing my event for 20 years and I just really want to revamp it. So from your perspective, are there a couple of pitfalls, maybe 1, 2, maybe 3 things that you would say, whatever you do, don't do this?
Don't do open seating.
Okay.
Give everyone a seat assignment.
Okay.
I'm telling you, people are like, where am I sitting? Who am I sitting with? What's happening? Where do I go? What table am I at?
Yeah. They need direction.
Yeah. So I have now learned that I, plan a wedding for 400 people. And because at your wedding, you would never say open seating, right? There's the placement cards. There's, Aunt Sue can't talk to... I can't even tell you. The amount of people in this community like, okay, well, don't put so-and-so by my table.
Don't put that table by that table.
Yeah. Oh, God. And don't put those guys by,
Yeah.
Put them across the room on the other side of the stage.
Or we can talk about this. We won't, but sometimes we'd say, hey, yes, this person has to be next to this person because we're going to build some competition in these live auction items. And so we need Bill to be next to George because, there's some
because they're going to be like, who's the most successful? We're going to like battle it out. But
no open seating. Okay.
But for the most part, so I have learned that, and it is hard to do, seating charts. But if you just break it down by a table sponsor, and then I don't really, care what guests they bring, and somebody's sick, and so I'm going to bring this person instead. And so that's the other luxury of having a paperless event is because I just let the table captain know you're table 10. So then all of their people know exactly where they're going to be even before walking in. And then it alleviates that stress of, am I going to be stuck with somebody that I don't want to be stuck with?
Yep.
So I would say yes to the seating chart.
Okay. Major pitfall number 1. Anything else? Any other? Or what's something that you say? So yes to the seating chart.
Yes to the seating chart.
It's kind of a must do and also a must not do. So that's a must not. Is there something that you say? Okay.
You have to go in with the intention that there will be a crisis.
There will be.
But it's just at what capacity is that crisis going to be? So there was an event. I feel like it was it the Spooky Soiree? No, it was maybe another event. Chuck calls me from the resort morning of. Kristin, we have a crisis. Oh, God. Okay.
You never want to hear that from Chuck.
It's a napkin. It's a napkin crisis.
Oh.
The launder wasn't done. The navy napkins, there's not enough. Should we go navy and white combination? I'm like, well, no, we're not having a nautical event. So, no, let's just stick with the white. And he was like, okay. I was like, crisis averted. So I went into that event thinking, could there be a possible crisis outside of the napkin crisis? And guess what? That was the crisis. The napkin crisis
was the crisis.
I
love that. That's so good. Oh, my gosh.
But with every crisis, again, we use that term loosely. It's not like catastrophic.
But it can feel like it because
my.
by the morning of your event, the last thing you want is a call from Chuck. You do not want that.
No, you don't.
And so you're already anxious about that. Why is he calling me?
Or a text from your speaker like, I have laryngitis. You know, you always and okay, back to the positives, you always have a plan B. There needs to be a plan B. So if we're outside, there needs to be a tent rented, maybe not put up, but I can't even tell you how many events were just like, oh, that won't happen. Really? The weather? We won't even talk about our second Why Women in Shoes, but it's like, oh, there's a lightning storm? Oh, we can't have people outside. So those are the kind of things like I feel with experience comes the knowledge of knowing that anything could happen.
Sure.
But let's just keep our head on straight and figure out. I'm a problem solver.
Yep.
So I'm a lot better at that than I used to be. Like, oh my God.
Yep.
So now it's just, there will be a crisis.
There will be a crisis.
I always hope for a napkin crisis. Because that's easy to solve.
That's a non-crisis crisis. We like those ones. Okay, so last thing I want to ask you is there's plenty of things to give us pause, but there's also a lot to the optimism that surrounds us. We see it every day. We see the community coming together. Do you have like a big, audacious dream? Obviously, it's putting CASA out of business, right? That's such a great dream. Put CASA out of business. But is there something else that Kristin Ludwig says, you know what, this is what if money didn't matter and time didn't matter and all the stars were aligned, my big audacious dream is what?
Now you're making it like become reality. I have sold several people this, but through our work at CASA, we have realized that there's a huge need for the youth of this community. And yes, we have Boys and Girls Club. And yes, there's this infinite amount of support through recreation and teenage groups and small groups and things of that nature. We do not have what traditionally, and as soon as I say it, everybody knows what it is, a Big Brothers Big Sisters. So through CASA, we have created a Children's Lighthouse Foundation. And not a lot of people know about it yet, but it's there. Like we have our EIN, and the lighthouse effect is a known effect that we all can be the lighthouse to somebody else. We all have that beacon of light that we can look at our own lives and through our own chaos and our own mistakes, really shine the light on somebody that might be getting ready, to experience it or going through it. So through that mentorship program, I would just love to see that flourish and become a common name, just like Big Brothers Big Sisters is nationally, to have the Lighthouse Foundation just like, oh yeah, are you a lighthouse for somebody? Yeah, I'm a big lighthouse or little lighthouse. So, and then I've always said that one of those dilapidated hotels on Sherman, which I don't think there is even any more of.
I know they go away.
They go away. But just to really have a project and turn that into just like a situational housing in which someone is just in between jobs or a transient or maybe just left an abusive marriage. And I know Safe Passage has resources and there are resources there, but just one of those little studio places that just give people a pause.
A safe place to land.
To just, I need to get it together. Like I need to get my head on straight, and whether that is just reaching out and saying I need help or having these resources. And I'm not talking about people that are just kind of schlepping through life. Like these are rock stars that, given the opportunity and the encouragement and somebody to say you are worthy of dreaming big and doing it, those are the people that I want to just have there.
Envelop.
Yeah. And be like, I was there for 6 months, and this is what came out of it. And maybe dream. I'm wishful. I'm just like, because I feel like everyone has the good inside of them. And they just, given the proper resources, they can make it happen.
Yeah, I love it.
So there it is.
It's a big goal. I like it. It's a big, audacious dream. Well, Kristin, thank you so much for joining me. It's an honor to work alongside you.
I love it.
It's such a pleasure to call you a friend. And I'm just thankful that you are in this community and that you pour out so much of yourself to the good of others. It's a pleasure to know you. So thanks for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me. And as always, I just love when I can give you a call up and say, okay, I'm going to dive into this. You ready to go with me? Because it's awesome to have a partnership.
I would follow you anywhere.
Thanks, Rose.